Hi Biology, Mr. Wagner here. We're going through part 2 on our notes for creation and evolution. Today we're going to be talking about radiometric dating. Macroevolutionists claim, macro again is big scale evolution, that's molecules to man, claim that molecules to man evolution is possible due to the extreme length of time in Earth's history. They base their timeline on something called radiometric dating. Radioactive isotopes decay at relatively constant rates called the half-life. Scientists try to work backwards to set up a timetable of Earth's history based on the half-life of these elements. And it kind of looks like this little chart. You need to know the starting quantities of the element and the final quantities of the element to accurately determine the age of something. If you take a half of something over and over, pretty soon that amount that's left is indistinguishable from the amount that preceded it. So you see when we get to half-lives, the first half-life takes a lot, second half-life takes a lot, each one takes less and less and less, okay? So this is the chart for half-lives on the bottom and for percent of the original isotope remaining. Could Mount Rushmore have been created by natural processes, such as wind, rain, and erosion? Of course not. What if you had 1,000,000 years to do it? Well, no, it still wouldn't come out this way. Could the people depicted on Mount Rushmore have been created by natural processes? That's natural selection or evolution? And the answer is obviously no. What if you had millions of years to do it? Still no. What if you had billions of years or trillions of years? Still no. There has to be some argument for intelligent design. Intelligent design, okay? If we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys around? This is a poor argument against evolution. Evolutionists actually never said that we evolved from monkeys. Evolutionists affect populations of organisms, and according to evolutionary theory, a subpopulation of monkeys could have evolved into apes and into humans. That doesn't mean that all monkeys and apes would have to disappear for humans to evolve. They also use the argument that we did not evolve from apes, but that apes and man had a common ancestor. A common ancestor. That would be, of course, their argument that we have common ancestors. Dinosaurs. Poor arguments against evolution. Dinosaurs were never really alive. God just put their fossils in the ground to test our faith. We believe dinosaurs were real live creatures. Dinosaurs were created on day 6 before people, but on that same day. This means that dinosaurs would have existed at the same time as humans. Evidence that prehistoric humans knew about dinosaurs. There are ice stones in Peru, and there are Anasazi petrographs in Utah. And remember, all we have left of dinosaurs is simply their bones. So we're not really sure exactly what their skin looked like or the tissue around them. All we have is their bones. We did have a couple like woolly mammoths that were frozen. But other than that, these terrible depictions we have about dinosaurs, we're not really sure that they're 100% accurate. Evidence that prehistoric humans knew about dinosaurs. There's the Acambaro figures of Mexico. There's the Angkor Wat Temple in Cambodia. Both of them look like they have pictures of things that kind of look like dinosaurs. Poor arguments against evolution. Evolution is just a theory. The word theory is in the scientific realm is different than how the word is used commonly. We usually think of the word theory as best guess. The scientific word theory is different. Theory in science means a unifying and broad explanation of a natural phenomena. A unifying and broad explanation of a natural phenomena. So we can't just say it's a theory. Scientists would say, yes, of course it's a theory, and therefore it's pretty much well established that it explains and unifies this natural phenomena. These are some much better arguments against evolution. For life to begin, there would need to be a cell. According to the laws of probability, if the chance of an event occurring is smaller than 1 to the 10 to the negative 50, That would be 50 zeros in front of a 1. 1 point, 50 zeros, and then the 1. If the probability is like that, that event's never going to occur. It's never going to occur. Okay? That's just kind of proven scientifically. And the people who proved that scientifically were a couple of astronomers, Sir Fred Hoyle in astronomy and Chandra Wickramansinghji, professor of applied mathematics and astronomy. They calculated the probability of getting a cell just by natural processes to be this: 1 times 10 to the negative 40,000. That's 40,000 zeros and then a 1. And we said that if something was 1 to the negative 50, it's probably never going to happen. Every little thing had to fall apart. It would be like a tornado going through a junkyard and perfectly assembling a 747. That's never going to happen. I don't care how many times you have. I don't care if you do it a billion. I don't care if you do it a 1 with 50 zeros at the end. If you do it that many times, it's never going to happen. There has to be intelligent design. There has to be someone who's going to direct where everything goes and where everything fits in perfectly. So therefore, the chances of a cell developing simple by, well, it just kind of fell into place and that's how it worked, not possible. Even if you counted all the countless different galaxies, even if you counted all the millions of years that we had, all the millions of seconds that a cell could have formed, it's not rational to think that it ever happened. Probability is way too small. Having a single cell put together correctly by chance is the same as a tornado going through a junkyard and perfectly putting together that Boeing 747. And even once the pieces are correctly aligned, there still needs to be some way of changing it from a dead airplane to something that's actually alive. So even if you could take all those processes in cells, all those parts, and get all the parts exactly in the right spot, you still wouldn't have life. It would be like taking pieces from corpses and perfectly assembling another human being. You could get all those millions and billions of cells and muscles and eyes and circuits and nerves and everything's in all the right spot just by natural chances. But even if you did that, you still would not actually have life. This is one reason why evolutionists need billions of years. They say, well, it's got to be billions and billions of years. Why? That makes it more plausible in their mind that it actually could happen just once out of those billions of opportunities. Of course, that's not correct. It's not true. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. The probability of transitional forms. According to the theory of evolution, structures had to develop one step at a time, and they have to remain fully functional at each step. Evolution states that bats evolved from shrew-like rodents. If the bat's fingers were getting longer and the skin growing between them, it makes them useless to run, walk, hold food, or fly. This is not an advantage at all. So in other words, what we're trying to say here is that if they said, well, a mole's, a shrew's fingers got longer and skin grew between them, and the next thing you know, after millions of years, it developed into a bat where they could fly. Okay, the problem is in those millions of years when the fingers are getting longer and the wings are developing between the fingers, the stretchy fabric and the skin is growing between the fingers to make the wings, the bat is neither able to fly, nor because of its long fingers and because of its webbing between its fingers, it's no longer able to dig, which is what the rodent did as a shrew. Shrews dig and bats fly. If you have a transitional thing that's like a half bat, half shrew, it can neither fly, wings are not fully developed, and it can neither dig. Why can it not dig? Well, because its fingers are so long and skin's growing between them. So in this instance, it cannot fly, it cannot dig, it cannot exist in its current species. So in other words, this long millions of years of evolution for species to go from the shrew to the bat is not practical because this bat shrew creature that lived for supposedly millions of years would not be able to dig or fly. It would not be functional. It doesn't work that way. Evolution states that amphibians evolved into reptiles. The egg of an amphibian is made of a jelly substance, has the yolk attached to the embryo, and is in water. A reptilian egg has a shell, a yolk separate from the embryo, and is on land. The organism would have to develop these characteristics simultaneously to survive. So what does that mean? It means that the shell would have to, number one, get a hard shell from a jelly shell at the same time that the yolk separates from the embryo instead of being attached, and at the same time that it moves from a wet environment to a land environment. All three of those things would have to happen simultaneously. The chance of one of them happening is completely entirely remote. The chance of all three of them happening, and again, at the same time, probably not likely. Great arguments against evolution: natural selection and genetic variety. Natural selection does not produce new characteristics. So when we talk about natural selection, we're talking about microevolution. We're talking about beaks within a finch changing. We're talking about things that happen within a specific species, that changes do occur. And we agree with that. But natural selection does not produce new characteristics. It just reveals hidden characteristics. Example, insects that are resistant to pesticides, bacteria that are resistant to, bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics, and bacteria DNA is almost identical to that of the bacterial fossilized in amber. So again, these are all examples that the DNA that we found fossilized in amber is almost identical to bacteria that we have right now. So we don't see millions of years of change. We don't see things that were different. We see pretty much the same thing. Pretty much the same thing. Great arguments for creation. Comparative anatomy, the study of similarities and differences in the body structures of organisms. So this is what people will say. Evolutionists will say, look at the human, the cat, the whale, and the bat. They all have the very same kind of design feature. Therefore, they must have evolved from a common ancestor. We, of course, would argue that no. Evolutionists use comparable anatomy to say that one organism has evolved from another because they're similar. There are some parts of organisms that are similar, but they are not evolutionarily close. According to Christians, comparative anatomy shows we have a common creator. Why are they all similar? Well, the same God created all of them. Look at this. 3 of these pictures have similarities. Why are they similar? They were painted by the same artist. We can point to animals having similar characteristics. Why? They were made by the same being. His name is God. So the reason they're similar is they all had the same author. They all had the same creator. They all had the same designer. Another great argument for evolutionists is the complexity of life. Molecular biology. Scientists who seek to discover how the mechanisms of a living cell work. The recent explosion of information of cellular components and activities have caused problems for the theory of evolution. In Darwin's day, the understanding of cell was very simple. They thought that each cell was filled with protoplasm that had a vital force, which mysteriously powered the cell. Maybe you want to call it a life force or a life energy, something like that. It's now obvious that these intricately designed mechanisms could not have been constructed by chance. It's now obvious that these intricately designed mechanisms could not be constructed simply, again, by chance. So Darwin understood a cell, and he said, well, the cell is basically pretty empty. It's just a little circle. It's got a bunch of jelly in it. That's all it is. We know now the cell is filled with millions of organelles that do millions of different functions. Each single individual cell has a nucleus, has an ER, a rough ER, a smooth ER, has endoplasmic reticulum, has ribosomes, creates proteins, all kinds of things. So again, the chance of one of these just happening, unlikely. But the chance of one of these being designed by someone, that's real. So this is just an example of cell metabolism chart. This is what molecular biologists put together. This is how the metabolism chart works for a single cell. All of this. And evolutionists are going to say it all fell together. After billions and billions of tries, all the little pieces got into all the right little bits. And then, even once all the pieces are together, they actually function, they somehow came alive, and then they somehow all function together. What's more likely is created by a God who designed it this way so that all the pieces would work together. Very little about heredity and genetics was known at the time of Darwin. He knew that parents passed on traits to their offspring, but he didn't know how. In his ignorance, he thought that there was not a limit to the variety of traits. So he just thought you could pass on just about anything under the sun from one cell to another. That's not what we discover now. Variety within kinds generally results from pre-existing genetic variation. It was then thought that mutations would cause a change of genetic variety. Oh, something is mutated, therefore we get a new species. However, mutations cause genetic information to be lost, not gained. Anytime there's a mutation, something is lost, never gained. So if evolution said that, something develops into something else, something develops wings, where do we gain this new genetic information that says we need to make wings? Through a mutation, they claim. Again, we have no evidence, nor have we ever seen in the history of any evidence, a mutation where something was gained. And if it was gained, where did it come from? If one cell develops from another cell, how does it get extra information telling it to do something different or to build something different? Where did that come from? It has to come from outside somewhere. There's no evidence of it because it doesn't work that way. Genetic information is lost in more mutations, which perfectly matches up with our theory of the earth was created perfect and we are in a state of decline going down into entropy where we're losing more and more things. We're going from a complex state to a chaotic state. That perfectly matches up with what we see regarding genetic informations and the loss of information. However, evolution claims the opposite. We're starting it simple and everything's just going up, 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 up. We're gaining more and more things, not found in nature in any way, shape, or form. What about theoretical speculations? Coming up with general principles to explain what happens in the universe. That's what a speculation is. We come up with some kind of a theory and we speculate this is what happens. Science also has something called observation. We look very closely at the universe to gain knowledge from it. These are two ways in which we can figure out the world around us in science. Another kind of science is called experimentation. Testing of a theoretical speculation in a controlled, systematic way. We go into a lab, we run a test, we control everything else, we come up with a theory, and we come up with results. Testing is needed to confirm theories. If testing fails to confirm the theory must be either disregarded or modified. One of those two. If testing over and over again simply doesn't give us the results, then my theory either has to be discarded or it has to be modified. Testing ensures that over the long run, scientific theories that contain errors are going to be eliminated. Well, guess what? No one can test evolution because we don't have a controlled environment big enough to create a planet or to create life. We do have things like direct observation, being able to observe with your senses things that you see. We have indirect observation, using scientific tools to make an observation, maybe measuring temperature or something else. A scientific observation must be both repeatable and free from bias. So we have to be able to repeat the scientific observation, and it has to be free from bias. So in other words, we look and we see that the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. We can view that the next day and the next day and the next day, and it's repeatable. It's repeatable. It's not affected by any bias. It simply is what it is. We can measure the temperature of the sun using tools, and that's repeatable. We can do that day after day. Those are things that we can scientifically figure out and redo. We cannot do that with evolution. Cannot do that with evolution. In fact, let's discuss some of these questions. In what ways does the theory of molecules to man evolution depart from true science? Well, you cannot do that experiment anywhere in the lab, and whenever that's been tried in the lab, it's always failed. They've tried to actually take molecules, put them in a blender, stir them around, and eventually get all the molecules right back in the exact same place. It has never worked yet. So it cannot be tested. Can it be observed repeatedly over and over? No, it happened one time. We've never seen it happen in the universe anywhere else, nor has it been repeated or measured. So these are your notes. Go ahead and fill them out as best you can. If there's missing a couple or there's a couple spaces, I believe there may be a different PowerPoint that I used for my notes. So don't worry so much about that, but make sure and do the assignment, the creation versus evolution assignment. Everything from the assignment should be word for word off of these notes and off of this note packet. You can put that together and do that. All right, take care. God bless. Have a great day, class.